All right, we are live now. So, hello there. This is my name is Arun Gupta, and with me today I have Eben Haber. Eben Haber, you want to introduce yourself?
Hello, I'm Eben Haber. I've been at Couchbase for just a little bit more than a year now, and I'm working on improved tooling to help people understand their data better.
Excellent. Tooling is very, very critical for what we do at Couchbase. My name is Arun Gupta, and I run the developer advocacy team here. We are here as part of a Coffee on Couchbase webinar series. And today, Eben is going to show us what we call the Couchbase Query Workbench. So, Eben, tell me about it. What is this Couchbase Query Workbench?
Okay, well, with Couchbase 4.0, Nickel, our query language that's very similar to SQL, became available throughout the product. It's now available in every installation. And while Nickel makes a very powerful way to help people understand and explore their data in an ad hoc fashion, which is something that really can be quite difficult in a key value document. So Nickel just by itself isn't quite enough because while the command line tool CBQ, which supports Nickel, does a very good job in executing queries, there's still some limitations in terms of being able to really know what's going on inside a Couchbase bucket in terms of what kinds of documents exist, being able to edit the query input and adjust it for when you make mistakes, which is inevitable, at least for me, and then coming up with better ways of viewing the results of Nickel queries. So I'm going to...
Awesome, actually. Hold on. So
okay.
That's really cool because Nickel is a new concept. Couchbase 4, in that sense, is a transformational release. And people who may have some challenge, a lot of people know SQL, so we are trying to leverage that skill set to bring them on board and apply that to a NoSQL database. But if they want to learn the nuances of NoSQL or Nickel particularly in that sense, and they do not have time to go through the tutorial or a manual, they can actually try the Query Workbench and learn what buckets are there and then query them and understand the syntax and play around with it.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay, so now let's say I'm a Couchbase user. I've been using 3.0. Is this Query Workbench work with 3.0 or is it exclusively 4.0 onwards?
It's exclusively with 4.0 onwards. So we'll work with 4.0. It should work with future versions. But unfortunately, due to certain limitations in the architecture, we couldn't get it to work with 3.0.
And that's fair because Nickel is introduced in 4.0 in that sense. So people need to realize this only works with 4.0, which is cool. But it will continue to work with future releases. So that's certainly nice to know. Now, let's say I'm super excited with Couchbase, Nickel, SQL for JSON. How do I get started with it?
Okay, so well, the first thing you need is a Couchbase instance. So you need to have Couchbase 4.0 or both installed somewhere. And so there are lots of online help to help you do that. And if you're just exploring Nickel, probably the best thing to do is just to create a single node instance on whatever computer you use every day, so your laptop.
So it doesn't matter whether it's running as a Couchbase server on a bare metal or on a cloud or as a Docker container or on Azure or Amazon. Does it matter really?
It doesn't matter at all. So whatever is the most convenient Couchbase instance for you, it might be a experimental setup that you're just learning about. It might be something where you're actually doing testing on a real deployment, and you want to be able to run those queries and understand what's going on in the data better.
So cool. It could be running on a host on a specific port, and that's where you will connect to it.
Yes. So what the Query Workbench is it is a standalone program that talks to the Couchbase query engine, and then it provides a UI on a certain port that you can connect to with your web browser. So that standalone program does everything that's needed in terms of both doing schema inferencing, which I'll show you in a minute, and executing the queries and then serving up the UI for the results.
Nice. So okay, I'm a Couchbase 4 user. Show me how do I get started with Couchbase Query Workbench?
Okay, well, the very first thing you need to do is go to the Couchbase downloads page, and you'll find...
So you're going to go to your screen and go to the website, maybe?
Okay, yes.
Talk us through that.
I guess I'll need to just Can you pause recording or?
No, that's good.
Okay. Let me find the page first.
Yeah. And you may want to share the screen.
I didn't have that link up, so
That's okay. People need to realize this is completely organic, not artifact.
Okay, couchbase.com/download. So I will share my screen.
Yeah.
Okay, I am screen sharing. All right. Let's go to downloads, and if you go to the couchbase.com/NoSQL databases/downloads, or I just did a web search on couchbase.com/downloads. If you look at tools, you will find the Couchbase Query Workbench Developer Preview 1. There's a version 1.0.2, which should be coming out sometime this week. So
as you said rightly, this is not baked into the Couchbase server.
Right.
You could be running Couchbase wherever you want to run it, but then you need to download this tool in addition to that Couchbase server.
Yes, and you don't even need to run this on the same machine, though it will run definitely better if you run it on the same cluster as your Couchbase installation.
Now, you mentioned particularly about a single node install. Is that a requirement, or is that just an ease of use thing?
That's just an ease of use thing. If you're just getting started with Couchbase, I found that the single node instance is the easiest way to get going. And for running Nickel queries, a multi-node cluster isn't really necessary.
Yeah.
Okay, so you download it. And then, let's see, in my downloads folder, I have a bunch of instances of the Query Workbench, and this is version 1.0.2.
So this is a tool that is platform specific?
Yes, there's a different version for Linux, for Windows, and for Mac. And in this case, I have the Mac version, but they're, let's see, I think somewhere I've got the Linux version that I downloaded.
Okay. But I guess the installer, the website is intelligent enough.
The website will tell you which one it thinks your platform needs, but you can certainly download a different one.
Yeah.
So there is a standalone program called CBQ GUI. That is the program I mentioned earlier, which provides the web UI on port 8094, and it also talks to CBQ Engine. There's also a file called launchcbqgui.sh, or on Windows .bat, and this is a script that shows you how to launch it, and the default settings should be sufficient for connecting to a running instance on the same machine. But if you wanted to change it, this will show you how to use all the arguments.
Very straightforward. I just fire up a Couchbase server, fire up the CBQ GUI, and it'll connect to that localhost 8091. And if the host and port are different, then of course you can modify this script and then it runs as well.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Okay, so now I'll show you what comes up when you. So this is the 1.0.2 of the Query Workbench. So what you have.
So this is different from the one that is on the web because you're working on this.
This is slightly newer, yes.
Slightly newer. And when will this be released?
We hope this week. It's in QA right now.
Lovely.
So what we have on the left is we have a list of different buckets. In the top right, we have an area for you to enter your Nickel queries, and in the bottom right, we have the area where the results of those queries will show up.
So when you connect to the Couchbase server, does it automatically query what buckets are available?
Yes.
How is this list generated on the left side?
Yes, so this happens automatically when the UI first starts up. Depending upon what kind of indexes you have, influences whether or not you can query those buckets. If a bucket does not have any indexes at all, about the only thing you can do is select count star. You can find out how many documents there are in a bucket, but that's it. You can't do any other kinds of queries. If you have a primary index on a bucket, you can actually do any kind of query you want, just like in SQL. You can do range queries, predicates on any of the fields. It's very flexible.
So for people who are starting new with Couchbase, bucket is a Couchbase specific terminology, and that's where sort of all the JSON documents are stored.
Yes.
And so this document, this tool actually will come up it'll connect to the host and port, query all the buckets that are available. So you don't need to know what buckets are existing, and
Yes.
then they just show up. Now, can they create a new bucket with this?
You cannot create a new bucket through this interface. You have to use the regular Couchbase administrative console.
Okay. Okay.
But one of the things we can do, which is much harder in the other interfaces, is we can find out more about what is inside a bucket.
Lovely.
So we have some sample data sets that we ship with Couchbase. One of them is called GameSim sample, and if I click this little triangle next to the name of it, it does analysis. It says it looked at 294 documents. And it found 3 different document flavors, so 3 different types of documents that had more similarities with each other in the types of fields than with the other flavors. So flavor 1, it also mentions, wow, well, let's say I found about 26% of the documents fell into flavor 1, and all of those documents had in common a field called JSON type being equal to the value player. And it had the following fields. It had experience, hit points, JSON type, level, logged in, name, and UUID. And it gives a type, and it gives an example of a value found in that field. There's another flavor which just happened to have in common JSON type equals monster. And that had a different set of fields. And then finally, a flavor called who had in common the type item.
So this is unlike a database, a relational database table.
Yes.
It's just looking at all the documents, like 294 in this case, and figuring out which documents are similar. It doesn't mean they exactly have this structure.
Right. And for example, in a database, in a traditional relational database, you have a fixed schema, so that you are required to have every record in that table have the same fields. It turns out that in Couchbase, every document in a bucket could be completely different from every other document. But businesses being what there are often commonalities between the buckets. And what this approach does is it finds what those commonalities are. Right. Also important is that by default, it looks at 1,000 documents. It does random sampling. There aren't that many documents in GameSim. I can type, for example, select count star from, and this interface does do auto completion, which is very nice.
So it does it for the buckets, or it does it for the syntax as well?
It does it for the buckets. It will do it for the keywords, and it will do it for the field names.
Nice.
So we only have 586. So it was only with the random sampling, it got about half of those. So now count star is about the only query you can do on a bucket that doesn't have an index. That is something that is different. I mean, so Couchbase is very flexible in its schema, and as I said, every document could be different. They tend to be similar, but they tend to have some differences. So let's take a look at the beer sample, which is one of the.
And so a little up-level question. It automatically classified them into non-indexed buckets and indexed buckets, yes. So you know what kind of queries can be done.
Right. And even there's a third category, which is buckets that have a secondary index but not a primary index. And buckets with a secondary index, you can only write queries involving with predicates involving the secondary index. So if I had an index on the category field, then I could do select star where category equals Belgian and French ale, but I couldn't do just select star if I didn't have that primary index. The primary index is necessary for doing a sequential scan on the on a bucket.
Now, how does this differentiation of different bucket types help the developer?
So, well, it helps you know what kinds of queries you can write. And so if you find a bucket like GameSim sample, you realize you can't just do select star from GameSim sample. And what will happen is if I just do, if I try to do that, it will warn me, it will tell me, sorry, there is no primary key space of primary index on GameSim sample. But if I do that on a beer sample, then I do get a whole bunch of documents.
Nice. All right, so that differentiation is very helpful. Now, here in the results tab, for example, you're showing JSON, table, and tree. What are those different views?
Okay, so what happens is the results of a nickel query, and if you've used CBQ at all, you'll see the results of a nickel query are usually JSON. And JSON is human readable. It isn't always the most readable form of data, but it is a reasonable form of data. But especially when you have documents that have common structure, JSON can be very verbose. So what happens with a table is it extracts all the common fields and puts them out this way. Now,
So it makes it more human flexible.
yes, it makes it a great deal more compact. So now in this case, because there are two flavors of beer sample that only overlap in some fields, I'm going to add a predicate here where type equals beer, and that will then my table will look nicer because all of these documents have a similar set of fields. So now some of these text fields are too big to fit, so they get truncated. But in general, we can look, we can compare. Right now, I'm looking at sorting. It works much better.
Nice.
And now
each of these columns can be sorted? Like,
not yet.
That would be nice.
Maybe one of
Yeah.
the tree version is very similar to the JSON version, except it uses coloring to make it a little bit easier to read.
Nice.
Now, another example. So when you're writing nickel queries, you query not just the data, but you can also query metadata. So I can say select star from the system colon indexes. And looking at the JSON, this is fairly verbose, and even though we only have 3 indexes, it's a little bit hard to compare them. But if I view them as a table, it is dramatically easier. You can see, oh, well, ID just looks like a random number, but I key space. Okay, well, I can say I've got an index on forms, an index on survey, and an index on beer sample. And they all have to be primary keys, so it's very easy to compare.
Got it. Okay, nice. So these are simple queries that can be executed. How would it help me learning nickel?
So I think with regard to learning nickel, it's going to help you know what the schema is. Now, certainly there are tutorials for learning nickel, which will take you through the details of the structure of the language and how it differs from SQL. But once you come down to looking at your own data, it really does help to be able to know not only what the names of the fields are, but see some examples of data. So if you see, oh, well, there's a geo object that that breweries have, but what is that object? Well, I guess it has 3 subfields, and Latin long happen to be numbers with decimal places, and then there's an accuracy level.
So you get the idea of the type, the field, what is the nested structure. Now, does this tool provide support for nickel? Like this provides support for joins and nets and unnets and all those things?
Yes, so any query that you can type into CBQ, any nickel query you can type in here as well, and it will provide you syntax code, auto-completion for bucket names, field names, and completion on keywords, and it will allow you to view the results of the different ways that I showed to help make them more comprehensible.
Now, is the current plan to keep this tool standalone, or will it be integrated later on with the server itself?
So the current plan is to integrate this with the interface, and so it should be appearing in a future version of Couchbase. But this developer preview will remain available for anybody who wants to use it with version 4.0. And there are some cases, for example, where you might have somebody who can issue queries, but you don't want them administering a Couchbase cluster. And since if you don't want them going into the Couchbase administrative console, this can provide a way for them to run queries without going in the admin mode.
I think that's a really great use case. So there is an administrator who's doing that role because they have the admin user password, all those details. But you want your users, so for example, the people who are building applications on Couchbase using SDK, they can look at this tool and kind of introspect and slice and dice the data, and then update their queries. So if a query doesn't work for some reason, they can do that. They don't have to go through CBQ, but this is a more graphical tool that will work for them.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, CBQ is a very good tool, especially if you want to do scripting. But if you want to do more ad hoc exploration, this can be much more helpful.
Excellent. Any last minute things that you want to share here or last comments?
I think this covers everything. So just encourage people to download this, give it a try, and please send feedback through the forums or contacting your Couchbase representative to let us know how we can make this help you use Couchbase better.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And you can always send questions on Stack Overflow. Follow us on Twitter. We'll have the contact information all in the information. Thank you so much.
Thank you.